We're now going to look at the Wall tool. The Wall tool is located in the Architecture tab within the Build panel. First one is our Wall tool. So the Wall tool will create a non-structural element in our model. We'll click once to open up the tool, and here you'll see our green contextual tab appears with our Draw panel, our options for that Wall tool, as well the modification section is open. The first thing we're going to look at is the Draw panel. The Draw panel will display our options of how in which we can draw our wall itself. We have the option of drawing by a line, a rectangle. We have our inscribed polygon, our circumscribed polygon, our circle, start end radius arc, center end arc, tangent end arc, fillet arc, pick lines, and pick faces. So depending on how you want to draw your wall, this is where you would then choose that option. To draw by line, I know it's selected as it's highlighted in blue. When I come into the drawing area to get my wall started, if we refer down to the status bar, it's telling me to click to enter wall start point. To get started, I'll simply left click once with the mouse. That will enter my start point for my wall. I'll then move my cursor in the direction which I want to draw my wall. I can also add an angle by moving my cursor still. To specify the finish point, again, I'll just left click with the mouse. So to specify a length when I'm creating a wall, when I start my wall and move the cursor in the direction in which I want my wall to be created, you'll notice that there is a blue dimension. This is known as a temporary dimension. So as I increase the length of the wall, you'll see that the dimension as well increases. So right now it is increasing in increments of 100. If I zoom in, those increments decrease down to 20. Again, if I zoom in more, those increments are now going up in fives. So that is one method of specifying a distance. We can also move the wall in the direction which we want to create it, and then manually type in my distance on the keyboard of 3000 and pressing enter. So there we have the length of that wall is 3000. So that is a second option of how we can specify the length of a wall. The third option, which is what Revit is based around, the first thing we'll do is just place the wall, and then afterwards we'll come back and revise it. So we will place the wall, then we'll come back, select it, then using the temporary dimensions, that's where we will then revise that distance and change its length. As well, if we wanted to add in an angle, we'll just specify our start point, add an angle, again roughly with the dimensions which we want. And then once it's placed, we'll come back, select the wall. Here we can change the distance, and there we can change our angle. So this is the basics of how we're going to model our project. The next method of which we can draw a wall is by rectangle. To start our rectangle, we'll click once on the screen, moving the cursor away in the opposite direction and clicking again and double escape. So as we've done before, the best method is to place the wall first, and then we'll come back and revise those dimensions. So we'll select one side, our temporary dimension appears, and we can adjust the length. Again, selecting the top, we can then adjust the width. This is the best method for modeling with Revit. The next drawing method is the inscribed polygon. So first we will specify our start point, which essentially is the center of our polygon. moving the cursor in the direction we want to go, then specifying our radius. So I've just moved my cursor in the correct direction, as well moving up in the increments to arrive at 3000. And then I'll click to place, and that is now an inscribed polygon. Same method for the circumscribed. The difference between the two, if you'll see in the center of the circumscribed, there's an outline of a circle. So the circumscribed means that the polygon sits on the outer face of that circle, while the inscribed sits on the inner face of that circle. And the next drawing method is by circle. So we will click to specify the center point, click again to specify our radius, and then afterwards we can come back to adjust the radius itself. You'll also notice that it's not a complete circle, there's actually two curves joined together. So we can delete one out and have a remaining curve. Next method is the start end radius. This will be creating an arc. So we'll specify our start and end point by clicking the mouse. So we'll click once for our start point, clicking again for our end point, and then lastly we'll specify our arc or radius. The next method is the center end arc. So we'll specify the center point, then the end point, and then lastly the actual arc itself. The next method is the tangent end arc. So this creates an arc at the end of a line. Next is the fillet arc. This creates a round corner between two intersecting lines. Next method is pick lines. This is a very useful tool. So as an example, I'm going to draw some model lines. So in the architecture tab, there's my model line. I'm just going to draw a few lines. And then with the pick lines tool, I then simply have to select the line for the wall to then be attached to it. This is very useful when we import CAD files. We'll simply use the pick line tool to attach it to the lines, and we'll quite quickly build up our model. Lastly is pick faces. The pick faces method applies when we create a conceptual mass. We can then apply a wall to that face. When we're modeling a project, we are presented with multiple modeling aids. These aids will appear on almost all of the components which we will use. So if I draw my first wall and draw another wall above it, first thing we'll get is our temporary vertical dimension. So you'll see that there's a dashed blue line. That is telling me that that wall, when I start it, will be snapped directly above it. I can also use the temporary dimension to specify the distance before I've even started. So click once to start, move my cursor in the direction, and again I'm presented with that vertical dimension, and click. So now I know that both of those walls are started at the same point, as well have the same length. Once it's placed, if I then select one of the walls, not only am I presented with the temporary dimension to change the length, I can also change its position relative to the closest component, which is the wall below. So it's currently 2500 between each of those location lines. So I can increase that or decrease it. As well, we have the grips, which I can click and drag to extend out the length. I can also add an angle with those grips, as well as the temporary dimension. Below it, there's another dimension symbol. If selected, we'll make that temporary dimension into a permanent dimension. To then remove it, we'll select it and delete it. I deleted it using the delete key on the keyboard. So another feature is this flipping arrow. So our location line is currently set to the interior face. So I can flip it using these arrows across that location line. With the temporary dimension on the right hand side, it has two grips as well. So this temporary dimension is currently set to the internal face. If I wanted to change the position of that temporary dimension, I will click and drag it. Once the face becomes highlighted in blue, I can then let go of the mouse for the temporary dimension to change. Again, click and drag the grip until I see the highlighted blue line, and then let go. Next, we will look into the wall's option bar. In conjunction with using the drawing panel here, we must also make changes in the options bar. When we're drawing a wall, we want to constrain it to certain levels. As we're currently drawing on level 0, our base constraint for our wall will be level 0. We must then specify which level the wall is going to be constrained to. So at the moment we only have level 0 as our base constraint, and level 1 is our next level up. So to get a good view of what I'm about to do, I'm going to open up an elevation view. In the project browser, we have our elevations heading. If we click on the expansion button there, we have our east elevation. So if we double click on that, that opens up our east elevation. Here we have our level 0, which we see in our floor plans, and our level 1, again, it's in our floor plans in the project browser. So if we go back to our level 0, I would like to have both of those views open at the same time. So in order to do that, I'm going to type in WT, which stands for window tile, and by doing that it's going to open up both views on the screen. So type in WT. Here on the left hand side we have our floor plan level 0, and on the right hand side we have our east elevation. So making sure that our level 0 is active, by simply clicking on the tile, we'll now go back to the wall tool. I'm going to be using my draw by line from the draw panel, and now getting onto the options bar. So the first option here, it says height. It may say depth on yours, but if I hit the drop down arrow, we can go between the two. So whether we draw by height or by depth simply means that as we're drawing currently on level 0, so there's our level 0, if I have height selected, my base level will be constrained to level 0, so my wall will go above level 0 and connect to level 1. If I change over to depth, my wall will be constrained at level 0 and go below my level 0. So that's the difference between the height and the depth. Next, once we've specified that, we're going to use height. We'll then select the next option, which is where we want to constrain it to. So we're currently on level 0, so our next level is level 1. So if we constrain it to level 1 and draw our wall, there you'll see on the right hand side in our east elevation, our wall's base constraint is level 0 and its top constraint is level 1. When we constrain this wall, if I go to my east elevation and select my level, and if I change the level, the wall, because it's been constrained to that level, it will move with the level. If I select unconnected, I'm then able to specify a height. So if I give this a height of 4000, draw my wall, you'll notice then on the east elevation that there's my wall, base constraint level 0, unconnected with a height of 4000. So if I change my first floor level, because the wall is not constrained to that level, the height doesn't change. So now we just want to have our level 0 open. So if we double tap on the top of the window tile, it'll bring us back into our level 0. For the next option, which is the location line, I'm going to change my detail level to medium. So come down here, to the view controls and select medium. So our next option is the location line. If we hit the drop down arrow, you can see we have 6 different options. With the first, which is the wall center line, I'm going to zoom in using my scroll wheel. When I click to start and move my cursor in the direction I want to draw my wall, you'll notice in the center there's a dashed light blue line. That is my location line. And as it's set to wall center line, you'll notice it's at the center point of that wall. It's also represented by the blue grips either side. So if I change it to finish face exterior, when I draw my wall, the dashed blue line is on the outer face of my wall, again represented by the blue grips either side. As well, we have finish face interior. So there's our dashed blue line on the inner face, so it's running along the plasterboard of the wall. Again, blue grips either side. The other options which we have are core center line, core face exterior, and core face interior. What they're referring to as the core is when we create a wall, we must specify what the core of that wall is. The core is generally the structural part of your component. So the blockwork here would be the core of our wall. To show you how that's represented, I'm going to select it. I'm going to go to Edit Type and edit the structure and show preview. Don't worry about what I've just done. We'll go into a lot more detail about this in a later video. But for now, I'm just going to show you this as a small preview so you have a better understanding about what a core boundary is. So here is a section view of the wall which has been created. There's our brickwork, which is represented here. Next is the insulation. There's our concrete block and our plasterboard finish. And you'll notice on the either side of our concrete block, we have our core boundaries. So this here is our exterior core boundary, this blue line here. And here's our internal core boundary, which is this blue line here. So the purpose of creating the core boundaries, which is when we have two intersecting walls, you'll notice that the blockwork joins together, ignoring the brickwork. So the blockwork will cut right through the brick as well as the insulation. So all components have been created in this manner. So when we go to draw a wall and we change our location line to the core center line, when I place my wall, you'll notice that the dashed blue line is in the center point of that blockwork. So it's in between those two core points. And we have core face exterior again. When I draw the wall, you notice my location line is on the external face of the blockwork. And we have the internal face of the blockwork. Our next option is chain. When we draw by line, having the chain feature turned on. When we click our start point and then our finish point, we'll automatically start a new line segment. So this is known as a chain. If I turn chain off, when I draw a line segment, that is a singular line segment and it will not continue as a chain. Next option is the offset. I'm going to change my location line to finish face interior. So when I draw my wall, that dashed blue line is on the face of the plasterboard. When I attach an offset, so I'll change my offset to 1000. Then when I draw my wall, you'll notice that there's my dashed blue line, which would be on the face of the plasterboard. and my wall is now offset up by 1000. If the wall is in the incorrect location and you want it to flip it to the other side of the location line, press the space bar to flip the wall to the other side of the location line. Next is the radius. So when it's turned on, we have a radius specified. When we draw two intersecting walls, it will generate a radius between those two intersecting walls. And lastly is join status. So when we draw two intersecting walls, they'll automatically join and the core boundaries will meet. If we have join status on disallow, when we do the same, the walls do not join, so the core boundaries do not meet. If you wanted the walls to join, simply select the wall and you'll notice this symbol here. That symbol is your join symbol. So once you click on that, the walls will then join together.